don't know if you know who Mark Andreessen is. He's a tech Andreessen. He's a tech entrepreneur and investor, and he speaks very bluntly about what's happened in big tech and in Hollywood. I really enjoy listening to him on podcasts. He was recently on a podcast and something funny happened. He started referencing the critical drinker. Wow. And he started mentioning, he said, he went on about like the whole premise of this podcast. We'll watch a quick clip from it. The whole premise of this podcast is what's wrong with Hollywood? And, you know, people can quibble about what's woke, what's not woke. But he said the best guy is this guy, the critical drinker. He calls out drinker by name. He doesn't mention it in this clip, but he says it's a great overall way of describing the problem with why people are rejecting modernity in movies. They don't like the message being pushed. So I love it that Bret Easton Ellis and Mark Andreessen are getting acclaimed and quoted for saying things that a lot of YouTubers have said for a long time. Let me share it's an 8-minute clip. We won't watch the whole thing. Watch the first few minutes. But this is really worth checking out the whole interview. But here's what he has to say. Let's comment after you hear the first few minutes of this.
You know, it's basically this year that the fever has broken. And there's a bunch of indications for that. And we're entering kind of the sort of post message, kind of era. And you know, we don't know what era we're heading into. Maybe there's a new message or something, but like we're there's a phase shift that's underway. But that phase shift is going to take time because it takes time to make movies, right? The movies that are greenlit today, right, are not going to come out, you know, until like whatever it's like 2027, 2028 soonest. And so so we're in this like liminal period, or this interstitial period where for the next like 3 years we're going to get like 1,000 movies that have like the message, and they're all going to act like the message is like brand new and fresh and nobody's ever heard it before, because they all pretend that this is like some big revelation that like all white people are racist, right? Like in every movie. And there's going to be like 1,000 more of those the next 3 years, and they're just going to land like an absolute thud, right? Like, because it's just like, if you wanted 69. That message, you got it, right? You already saw 1,000 movies to set you, like the next 1,000 movies don't contribute to that, right? And just to knock on one, and he's a brilliant filmmaker, but I just saw the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another, and it's literally like a time capsule. It's like a 2022 time capsule. It's literally like time froze in 2022. And in 2022, this movie would have been like, oh my God, like this movie is like, got the message, right? It's just like everything about it. We could spend hours just on this movie. And it lands today, and you're just watching, you're just like, wow, that was a weird time. Like, oh my goodness.
I want to talk more about this movie because I think it was Bret Easton Ellis who came out and was the first person, you know, because it's getting all the Oscar plaudits, like, oh, it's definitely in line for the Oscar, right? And he came out and he's like, it feels musty.
I don't know if Bret Easton Ellis was the first person. I think Alan and I said some things, but I guess my point is with this is he says at the beginning of his statement that the fever is broken. Like they realize that what's going on, like these things don't land. Do you want to comment on what he has to say in the first part of this? And we can go back and watch more, but anyone care to comment?
These people always end up being late to the party and then saying the shit we've been saying. And I'm using the royal we here since like years ago. Like it broke in 2024, the end of 2023, basically. Glad they've noticed.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about, I think, this time we've lived through, I think the impulse was a correct one in the sense that you want to include more people, you want to tell more stories, you want to hear the voices that we haven't heard. Look, I like that because I like to hear stories I haven't heard, and there's a lot of people that have stories to tell that we haven't heard. The problem is there are storytelling formats and tropes and things that have existed in some cases for thousands of years. And when you suddenly go and you try and subvert those storytelling formulas because you're trying to be nice to people or give people a voice, you're destroying both of those ideas, because the stories themselves are clearly they now exist for someone's agenda, and then the stories that you're trying to tell once you're trying to service this agenda end up feeling false, and they feel insincere. And so you're looking at all these things. I mean, it's one thing to sit there and go, okay, we're gonna have a female Doctor Who, maybe that could have worked. But when you go back and you try and retcon Doctor Who like they did all the way back to the very beginning,
Little black
and say,
girl.
say Doctor Who isn't Doctor Who, that becomes the worst kind of pandering. And then what you've done is you've taken this storytelling medium, which is Doctor Who, that's existed for over 60 years, and you've ruined it. You have come in there and you've stated what you're going to do. First of all, you've told the fan base that they're somehow defective, that there's something wrong with you people, because now we're going to make this more inclusive and make it better, which by definition means you're lesser than, because you guys like something that wasn't as inclusive as it should be. And life isn't inclusive. Not everybody, you make the point, do women want to be bricklayers? No, women want to do different things. Men and women like different things. Women tend to gravitate toward people businesses, and men like thing businesses. And that's just a biological kind of thing. Does that mean women can't be bricklayers or plumbers? No, but most women don't gravitate toward those businesses, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to insinuate or insert everybody into everything, because that's not what life is about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand if there's people that are being prevented from getting into things, I don't think that's right. I think people should be able to do or pursue whatever they want to pursue. But our storytelling, these stories were compromised from their inception, which means they were not sincere and they weren't good stories. And we, the audience, are expected to just choke them down.
The road to hell.
When they were bad.
Yeah.
Well, and it worked for nobody.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Elaine.
I mean, back in 2003, you had an incredible sci-fi show where it was a remake, and there were two characters that were sex swapped, Boomer and Starbuck,
Yes.
Battlestar Galactica. And then when you look at the way Katie Sackhoff and Ronald D. Moore talk about the reasoning behind those choices, it wasn't creativity by committee. It wasn't checking a box. It was just writing a great, compelling character. And that's why that show still stands the test of time today. And Katie was just on Joe Rogan as well, like hearing her talk about it.
I saw it. It was great.
And she said that. She addressed that. They were just well-written characters, and she herself doesn't like the tropiness. I'm also currently watching Foundation, and where we have Salvor Hardin, who is sex swap, but there is the most tropes I've ever seen crammed into one character that I've ever seen. And it's so sad. And you compare those things today. So it's just all about the writing instead of just preaching a message. And we can tell the difference, whether or not you're phoning it in and just inserting strong female character here, or you're sincerely trying to write a good, compelling story, who also happens to be a woman. And they talk about Alien as well in that conversation. It's a great conversation, really telling of where writing has been, where it's devolved, where they just use female characters just out of pure laziness and to check a box, not out of telling a genuinely good story.
And it's intention, like we talked about. Ronald D. Moore didn't do that because he had no fucking ideas. He just wanted to rip off BSG. He did it because, I could do this better, and I think I really have something to say across the board. And then he did it. And so that's why it's also good. He didn't poach it. In fact, I'd say he made it quite better.
Yeah,
the idea of just like hijacking an IP just to push your agenda, right? Like that's what you like. To your point, Rob, we do want new, diverse, interesting stories from different backgrounds and people, but all they've done is just hijack Star Wars and slapped, a message across it, instead of actually giving us something interesting to say within the Star Wars world. Like that's the problem. I think 100%. If they took these franchises and did something interesting with them, I think everybody would be on board with it. It's like, okay, cool. But if all you're going to do is just use it as a vehicle for your message and for your ideology, it's like you're destroying the franchise. You're destroying what had been previously built up with good writing, good characters, good storylines.
And also by definition,
go ahead.
And this is why we say like it dates it. It dates the material, it dates the IP, it dates the movies. That's what they were talking about. Like, oh, looking back, now you see like, oh, it was pretty cringe. Yeah, because it's dated. You date it by inserting whatever the current message is at the time. It dates the IP, it dates the art, it dates everything. And it's just going along with whatever the current thing is, the current message of the day is. And so it ends up dating it, and it doesn't last a lifetime. Like, you can go and watch Back to the Future, you can go and watch all these other great movies of the past, Jaws, Jurassic Park, and enjoy them. Why? Because it's just great movies. They're great movies, they're great stories. There's nothing, it's basically just entertainment, right? It's not dated. It's something you can go back and enjoy. You can't enjoy a lot of the current stuff. You can't go back and enjoy it. You watch it once and that's it. Like, you forget about it. There's movies that have come out that I saw like back in January and February that I don't even remember. It's like, oh yeah, that came out this year. Last year when I was making like my top lists of movies that I saw, I didn't remember watching half of them because they're so forgettable.
Yeah. You know what you just brought up with Back to the Future? Back to the Future has a great little element about civil rights with Goldie, the mayor.
Mhm.
And you see that, you know, and back in the 50s, he was sweeping up the soda fountain, and then he becomes the mayor of Hill Valley,
Yeah.
you know, in the present day. I mean, there's ways to inject messaging that feels honest, and again, it's authentic and it's sincere. And that you can tell, you know, you can feel it. And I often go back to the Shawshank Redemption. You know, in the original story, Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption, the character of Red was not a black man. And then when they cast Morgan Freeman, no one said anything. No one can imagine Red being played by anybody but Morgan Freeman. Right. And there's even a great moment that Frank Darabont left in the movie. Why do they call you Red? And Morgan Freeman's character says, maybe it's because I'm Irish. You know, and that's right out of the book, but they didn't want it, you know, they didn't change it. And nobody said anything because that character is indelible. It's played beautifully. Has an actor ever played a character better than Morgan Freeman plays Red in Shawshank Redemption? And nobody said a word.
Yeah.
Now, in today's marketing, they would use that as one of the main things for pushing a movie. That's what they would do.
I think really quick. I think it's great that they're catching up, and you know, Hollywood is, you know, seeing what we see now. That's really cool. The problem is this though, you know, you can't take a car, right? You can't just like never change the oil, never fix the brakes, you know, never change the tires, never do anything to maintain the car, and then sit there and wonder, you know, why it doesn't work anymore. We tried to tell you over and over that what you were doing isn't working. The fans, the people who paid the money to go see your shit, have told you guys that this isn't working, and they kept doing it anyway because they thought they were smarter than us, they thought they were better than us, and now they are reaping what they fucking deserve. I have no sympathy for Hollywood right now, and I will say this: I do think there is better TV, right? I think in some ways they are winning in the TV category. There's a lot of great shows that are streaming. Me and Badger were talking about Landman and just some of the other great shows that are out there right now.
Yeah,
but as far as movies go, man, I like I said, I don't care who buys who at this point. I don't think there's saving movies at the theater anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
because it's not about making art; it's about making money.
Yeah. Well,
I wish that were true. They would have fucking done some more base things. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now maybe hopefully it's about making money.
I wish that Tron was spared from this. If there is a course correction, which I don't know, I don't have any faith in upcoming things for that, because it seems that we've been saying this for years and years and years, that we just want good stories, and women want good stories too. It doesn't mean like just because there's a woman in it, then we're gonna go see the theater. No, they just want a well-written character, a well-written story, and so you have to put in the work to do that. You can't just check boxes and think that that's the formula. Clearly it's not, even if you have a famous IP. So they're going to have to actually work hard and be creative and imaginative.
Meritocracy, that's racist and bigoted and homophobic and sexist and all the things that we got called for years and years. But now they say it, and it's just fine.
You know
And
what I find
well,
interesting is take a movie like 9 to 5. It came out at a time when there was a glass ceiling and there was sexual harassment and it was pretty bad for women in the workplace. So that movie was great because it was of its time. But can you imagine if they remade that today?
Oh, they will.
Girl.
They
I
will.
do think that
and the
TV
comment,
is
you know, it's the you would feel like you got the wrong message from a movie, a remake today than you did when it first came out decades ago.
yeah.
Well, my point in saying this is,
like, I hate all men.
I think that Mark Andreessen quoting Drinker, it's like they're finally getting it. Okay. I think YouTubers were the canary in the coal mine, but now other people are saying it. And we will look back on this era of filmmaking. I mean, look, great storytelling is timeless. That's why we can revisit a movie like Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, Back to the Future, or 9 to 5, actually, which is still very entertaining and of its time. So, but let's see. There's a little bit more I can play of this podcast and see what you think here.
2020 to like 2025, it would just be studied for years.
I think even earlier. I think maybe
2016 to
2016.
Yeah, here, just a little bit more.
Ghostbusters
A little bit more.
Right. And I should get the actual like language he used because it was much worse than that. But he said it's like a musty film. It's exactly what you said. It's 2022. Like this was greenlit at a very different time. And now it's come out and like the world's moved on. And so I'm curious, like, do you think that we're still going to pretend these movies are great, even though they don't match with our time? Or is there going to be sort of a 3-year period where we are allowed to say, actually, like that doesn't make any sense anymore. And like maybe that movie shouldn't have been made?
Yeah, so this one's a complicated scenario. So just on the movie itself, the movie itself is actually, and it's quite like I quite enjoyed watching it. I quite enjoyed watching it not just for ironic reasons, but just also watching it of like how this happened. Like and there's a bunch of reasons. And and again, the filmmaker is one of the great filmmakers of the era, Paul Thomas Anderson. He made There Will Be Blood, and he made Boogie Nights, and like all these by the way, he made right there. I'll name 2 movies. Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood are 2 movies that are like they're going to be in the Hall of Fame of the art form, where it's like 100 years from now, people are going to be like, wow, that's what that culture was about. And so he is one of those guys, and clearly that's what he was going for in this movie. It is a weird movie in that it's partially based on a famous Thomas Pynchon novel called Vineland, which is Thomas Pynchon's movie. Is Thomas Pynchon's novel basically about it's essentially, I mean, it's essentially veiled through whatever, but it's basically like about the Days of Rage, the Brian Burrow book, or the Weather Underground, basically the violent social revolution, basically from the far left in the 60s, and then sort of what happened in the aftermath of that. And so like that's the theme of the novel, but it's very much a novel of and about the 1960s. It's not considered, most people don't consider it maybe the best Pynchon novel, but like it's a good mid-tier one, and it's in the pantheon. And it turns out it had been Paul Thomas Anderson's favorite novel. He'd been trying to make a version of it for 20 years or whatever. But what he did basically was he kept the very basic kind of plot framework setup, but then he completely updated it for the message, right? And so like it has like specifically it has a whole bunch of it has this whole basically it's a racial it has a whole racial kind of plot structure to the whole thing, and sexual in ways that are fairly amazing. But that are completely based on the current moment, circa 2022. And so it's a little bit like the 1960s. It's like the early 2020s filtered through the 1960s, and so it's just a little bit odd with that. Arguably, it is kind of salient to our times, because I think if you were to retitle the movie, you would just title it Antifa the movie. Like it's like a full-throated celebration of basically violent social change, violent social revolution. Like, and it's completely unapologetic. Like, I'm gonna spoil it. I'm just gonna spoiler alert. By the end,
spoiler alerts for monitoring the situation. Everyone's already seen it here. So.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour and 45-minute movie that I went to the theater, and I paid full price, and like I smuggled in my snacks and like the whole thing. I go through the whole thing, and I'm like, he's such a brilliant filmmaker. I'm hoping it's a subversive movie, right? And so I'm kind of hoping that the whole thing is like, by the end, he's like really like, okay, like these Weather Underground people who like went on the run for 20 years and destroyed their lives, and like we're always basically just like crazed privileged children like raging out against their basically their parents and blowing shit up and killing people, and just the whole thing was a giant mistake. And I was kind of hoping that would be kind of the way that you could tell the story. No. He's just like, oh no, that was great. like that was fantastically good. These people are amazing. Like these are the myths and legends of our time. He clearly wants to make these people into mythical figures. And then at the end, it's just very clear at the end. He's like, yes, and I completely endorse and support all of this.
Alan, that's what you pointed out.
Yep.
I'm going to leave it there. But any final thoughts on this?
It's hard to talk when you're on amphetamines. And a completely unrelated comment. Jesus.
Well, he's a fast talker, but I like him on podcasts. I think he really has a lot of insight, and you should listen to the whole episode. It's an hour long. He really gets into what's wrong with modern Hollywood, how streaming has broken the business model and isn't helping, and great films. I mean, it's sad to me. And I think Bret Easton Ellis kind of broke it's okay to not like this movie. Whereas and Alan and I got so much pushback for just giving it a very mixed to negative review.
Well, you guys hate everything. So
I'm a huge Bret Easton Ellis acolyte. I've read all of his books. And he was one of the first people to come out and talk about, I think he called it empire, like we're living in the world of empire, and then how empire is collapsing, and he's using empire not as like necessarily the American empire, but what our civilization is all about. And he's never been shy about anything. His first book, if you've only seen the movie, you haven't experienced, but when I read Less Than Zero that he wrote when he was like 20,
I love that
book. It was just insane. It made me, this is a terrible thing to say, but it made me want to move to LA. I'm like, if LA is really like that, I want to go. But it was horrifying. And he has a lot of really interesting stuff to say. I wish he'd write more books.
Yeah. White is really good too. One of his recent books. And also he does a podcast where he gives no fucks. He just doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.